Today, what are we going to dive in on? We're going to talk about the plan giving report that FreeWill has just published. We're going to dive in on a couple of the more interesting findings that surprised us. We'll sort of tell you what's changed in the last year. And then, of course, we'll talk about what to actually do about it, right? We want this information, but it would be even better to actually have a plan around it. So we're going to dive in. Some housekeeping first. As all these sessions are, this is approved for 1 CFRE credit. At the end of the session, my wonderful friend and colleague, Robert, who's filling in for Phoebe, who herself is on vacation this week, is going to drop a survey in the participation. So welcome and thank you, Robert, for being here. And so we'll drop a survey at the end of the chat, and that's how we'll certify it. So please do that. Here's the agenda. We'll do some very quick background before we get into the takeaways. Then we'll talk about some action steps. And just as a reminder, we will send around the slides and the recording later today, although some folks will still ask about that during the session. And so you can help me out by letting them know. All right, quick intros. My name is Patrick. This is what I actually looked like 7, 8 years ago at Stanford, along with my wonderful co-founder, Jenny Shia-Spradling, who I met back there. We have been building FreeWill for 8 years now, which is crazy. And we get to do it alongside a wonderful, brilliant, kind, loving team that's generated more than $10 billion raised to date. We have more than 1,500 nonprofit partners, and combined, we have more than 4 centuries of fundraising experience because we are all getting older. So, but very proud of our team and very delighted to work alongside them, and super excited to be with you. And so one of the other things that we like to do as a big thank you for being here, 1, spending time with us, 2, advancing your career, and 3, advancing all the mission that you work, is we like to give away some of my favorite books. This is a book called How to Begin. It's by Michael Bungay-Stanier, if I'm saying that correctly. And it's basically about, if there's something you want to change in your life, what are some of the actual steps to do it that actually will make it happen? And so feel free to take a read of this. Some of you might be thinking about starting a plan giving program if you don't have it. Some of you might be starting a new diet, new exercise routine, learning a new skill, whatever it may be, but just a great book about life. And so again, make a note in the survey, and we'll send it to 20 folks as a gift. Shannon says she loves this book. I don't know if anyone else has read it, but if you have, let us know, including if you didn't like it. That is okay as well. So thank you, Shannon, for sharing that. We asked you how your week is going, and people are feeling good, right? This is actually one of the highest we've seen in a while. That's what the end of summer does. People are feeling good. We're feeling eager. But how confident we're about hitting our goals? Probably got a lot fewer phone calls back this week as summer hits. And usually what this will take a summer dip and then start picking back up soon. But hopefully some of what we'll learn in the next 45 minutes or so will help you hit your goals. When we ask you what your biggest challenges are trying to fundraise more planned gifts, here's the most common and least common. So a lot of you really struggle with effective messaging for planned giving. So we'd love to talk more about that later. This was the #1 thing folks talked about. 2 is, how do we start a program? 3 is, how do we actually know who's a strong planned giving prospect? And thankfully, we have some really good data on that later. 4, how do we train our staff? Right, so we'll talk more about these things as well. Right, this is what you said this is the thing we need most help with. So hopefully we'll be able to take some of this as well. All right, so let's talk about why planned giving is so gosh darn important in 2024. And it's because it's where the money is. So up to $90 trillion is expected to be passed on over the next 20 years from the wealthy, primarily baby boomer generation, although including some silence, from 45 million US households. This is a huge deal. We think of it as the most important moment for philanthropy in the history of the world, right? That's how big this is. It started in 2023. In 2024, we're really seeing it in full swing. It is fair to say this is a once-in-a-century opportunity for nonprofits. And the reason is that boomers are incredibly wealthy. There's a ton of them, right? There's 5 reasons there's so much money happening here. 2 is social changes. What does it mean? It means not only there are a ton of them, it means more women enter the workforce compared to previous generations, which means more income earners overall, right? So more people earning more money. 3, education rates means those salaries went up considerably, right? People are much more productive. 4, housing prices. So when they made money and they used it to buy houses, those assets grew. Number 5 is also going to be asset growth, right? So folks that started investing in the 70s and 80s and 90s saw incredible returns in the time since, and this ends up being a huge amount of money, right? When we talk about the boomers, just to recap this before we get to the report, this is the folks born between 46 and 64, which makes you 60 to 78 years old in 2024. Second largest generation right now, but they are the largest by birth, right? So more boomers were born than millennials. There are more millennials around today still. It's 60% larger than the preceding generation. I mean, this is an enormous number, right? The folks that are sort of passed away in the last 10 years, silent generation, is a very small number. And it's going to see this huge jump in terms of numbers and dollars across the board. As I mentioned, larger at birth than Gen X or millennials or Gen Z, right? So very, very big. And you can see this, that the 65 plus generation grew by 34% over the last decade. We do this in census, right? So from 2010 to 2020, and obviously that number is going way up by 2024. So lots to think about here. Just to give you an idea, just to prove it, right? You can look at how many folks were born in the United States, which is where we're taking a lot of our stats from. And you see how small silent generation was compared to boomers. And then remember that boomers are very big compared to Gen X. So you actually won't have enough Gen X donors to fill the shoes of boomers. And so that's why planned giving tends to be incredibly important. Another thing on birth rates, I mean, this is what you can see here, just a huge spike from 46, about 9 months after the war ends, all the way through to 64. And you can see sort of expected mortality all the way through 2060, and you can see how much that goes up from a relatively small amount just 15 years ago. Last thing on boomers, as a generation, a couple things happened, right? Compared to younger generations, they're more religious and less educated. They married and had children later in life compared to older generations. They divorced, they remained single at higher rates. They had fewer kids. This is going to be a really important point, but more aggregate income, more wage earners, more investments, et cetera. You can see sort of life expectancy at birth here, just as you get a sense of, okay, well, if you're born between 46 and 64, when do people pass away, right? We need to know that. And you can see total male and female. We talked about the wealth, but just to recap it one more time, many folks, this is a really important point here, right? The wealth of boomers is primarily held in assets and not cash, right? Assets and not cash. Many folks who might be giving you nothing or $20 or $100 a year may own homes that are worth more than $1 million, right? Nearly half of all boomers purchased their first home when they were young, right? Those of you that are 27 sitting here listening to this think, oh, I can't believe other people got to buy houses at 27, compared to 37% of millennials in the same age range. The houses they bought were cheaper than they are now by a considerable amount. They've lived through outstanding economic performance, as we've said, and older generations have never had so much wealth compared to everyone else in history. Compared to 2022, right? So we say, okay, is this happening? Well, compared to 2022, did folks see an increase or a decrease in planned giving? And 40% said increase, 15% said decrease. So you see this. FreeWill partner, our dear friends at Susan G. Komen, doing great cancer research work, said that 2022 marked their biggest year, and it's been going up since. And so, yeah, what you see here is the other benefit of planned giving, just for the record, is that when someone makes a planned gift, they actually increase their giving in subsequent years. This is some great research that we saw by our friend, Dr. Russell James. Many of you know him. But you can see here that basically giving spikes after a planned gift is made, meaning put in the will, right? Not that they passed away, obviously. Put in a will, you then establish a tighter connection with the organization, and you see some pretty significant jumps in giving across the board, right? So we want this generally. So let's talk about the report, and let's pull out some of the really interesting findings that we've seen here. So first, some quick background on the report. This is our 6th report, right? So we do this every year for 6 years, and we really look at in-depth at the biggest trends in estate planning and legacy giving. It provides anonymized estate planning data from June 23 to May 24. So we do a 12-month session every time. It's not calendar year, it ends in May 2024, and then we use it to evaluate things in the fall, like we're doing right now, to really give you a sense of where things stand. At the end of the session, we will send you a link to the report so you can download it yourself, right? But the report's about 20 pages, and so we're gonna pull out some of the highlights and most interesting components right now. So some top level findings, right, is that we saw 16% of folks who made wills in 2020, in the last period, in the last 12 months, included a bequest in their estate plan, which is above the historical national average of 9%. Nearly $2 billion was committed to charity in the estate plans that we worked with. The biggest commitments ranged from, the commitments range from $100, which was the smallest, to 12.5 million. Our largest commitment was to a human services organization who partnered with FreeWill just 3 weeks before they saw this gift. So they are pumped. I wish we could do this for everybody. Average legacy donor is 53 years old. So you see a huge swath from 19 to 90 years old, or 99. And the average bequest size is 42,000, right? That's of a single gift, by the way. That's not total giving in a will. So let's talk about some various takeaways that I thought that really caught my eye that I wanted to share with you. The first is you see this actually interest in plan giving of Gen Z, which is a little bit of a wow moment. They're surprisingly proactive in estate planning, more so than we saw millennials at the same age. 21% of wills that Gen Z makes includes a bequest to charity, and it's a higher rate than any other age group. Now, some of this is that these folks tend to be less married and with fewer kids, which we'll see in a moment indicates a higher proclivity for giving, but interesting to see here. And we'll talk in a moment about what do you actually do if a Gen Zer leaves you a planned gift or includes you in a planned gift, right? When we look at ages, you can see here, right? How many folks, a couple of different things here, right? So 21% in the 18-24, 15% in the sort of broader range of millennials, not perfectly, 18% among sort of Gen Xers, roughly again, boomers, 15% giving, and then silent generation, 8% giving. So you see a little bit less giving in the silent generation compared to the baby boomers, right? These ages don't perfectly match up with generations, but it gives you a rough sense. You can also see that obviously most of the money is coming from folks 65 to 84 and 45 to 64, right? So it's very concentrated among older folks. Coming back to Gen Z, the average request size also went up by 23% from this group since 2023. And it was actually higher than folks in the 25 to 44 range as an average. So that was really interesting to see as well. Major causes for Gen Z: civil rights, education, family, and foster care were the causes that had the highest proportion of legacy donors in their 20s. So that's super interesting. Second trend, we're coming to middle-aged Americans, right? So estate planning is something commonly associated with older people, but actually every adult needs an estate plan for reasons we'll go into. Adults aged 45 to 64 make up just a quarter of the population, but they make up 38% of folks doing estate plans. So you're seeing a lot of folks make their first plans in this cohort in this time. They also make up 42% of all wills with bequests, right? So you see a lot of giving here as well. Again, you can see percentage of the US population and how many of those are over or underrepresented with estate plans. So you can see here the folks 65 to 84, excuse me, dramatically overrepresented, right? Compared to how much of the population they are, and 45 to 64 dramatically represented. Younger people, no surprise, underrepresented in will makers, and the oldest folks about even. So interesting to see there. Trend 3, women continue to lead in plan giving. So estate planning has a huge gender gap. And the same goes for legacy giving. And we'll talk about this. 56% of estate plans were written by women. Nearly 60% of all bequests committed were from women. So you see really big shifts here. The average bequest size for women was 47,000, which I think might be a little bit lower than men, but we'll check that out. When you look at the marital status of will makers, excuse me, for men and women and sort of making up the whole group, right? You see that 29% of folks making wills are married men, 30% are married women, only 13% are single men, and 24% are single women. So you actually see, the big gap here is not among spouses, married spouses in heterosexual relationships. It's actually among single people. And that a single woman is almost twice as likely as a single man to be making an estate plan, whereas married folks about the same. And so this drives the whole gender divide, which is really, really interesting. 33% of bequest dollars in total, right? That single women group is incredibly powerful. 1/3 of all bequest dollars were committed by single women. This is up from 31% in 2023, making the second consecutive year of growth, right? So you're seeing this on a rise. Women without kids comprised a higher percentage of wills, including a bequest, than women with children, which would not be surprising to you. And 26% of wills with bequests were created by women without children, compared to 14% of women with children, right? So basically, what's our big takeaway? The big component here is women without children as among the most charitable group. Women are also commonly leaving contingent gifts in their wills, right? We all know what contingent gifts are. This basically says, I leave it to this person, but if this person predeceases me, it goes somewhere else, and often to a charity. Now, this is really interesting by gender. So contingent gifts occur when a primary beneficiary, or the beneficiaries I just said, are unable to receive the gift, so it's passed along to the next in turn. This is important because statistically, women have a longer life expectancy than men. So if you have contingent gifts from a female spouse married to a male partner, you are going to get that more often. You're going to get that gift more often than if it's a contingent gift left by a man married to a female partner. You can see contingent gifts, 55% of them are from women, 44% are from men, a very small percentage are from folks that identify as non-binary or trans. The other reason here, right? Why does that happen? Why are contingent gifts from women more likely to actually cash in? Well, the female life expectancy in the United States is 80 years. The male life expectancy is 74 years. So if two people, right, one male, one female, marry at the same age, the woman is expected to outlive the man by a period of 5 years, right? Which of course increases the likelihood that their primary beneficiary may not receive the planned gift, and instead that will go to a woman. Now, we said they should outlive by 5 years when they get married at the same age, but as many of you might know, on average, women tend to marry men, again, in heterosexual relationships, who are a couple years their senior, about 2 years on average. And so suddenly, on average, right, obviously anything can happen, on average, a female spouse is outliving her male partner by 7 years, because you have that age gap, right, the life expectancy gap, plus the different age of marriages, which makes it much more likely that a contingent gift, again, from a woman, if the primary recipient is the spouse, ends up being, will end up getting to you, right? So just interesting stuff to see. For single people are the lifeblood of planned giving and the backbone here. Single individuals are 1.8 times, give 1.8 times larger gifts than married folks. Average request size for married folks was about 38,000. For married donors, excuse me, that must mean unmarried donors. That's a typo there. For unmarried donors, the gift size jumps to 69,000. Single users without kids saw a 4% increase in their share of dollars compared to 2023. So you're seeing this on the rise, right? Single women on the rise, single everybody on the rise across the board. And you can see here, right? The percentage of gifts of all bequest dollars committed, nearly half of all the dollars, right, are coming from folks who are single without children, compared to single with children, married without children, domestic partnership, et cetera. Now, this isn't a huge surprise, but single folks without children are not a huge component of the population, and yet their giving is equal to everybody else combined. So this is a really, really important. Marianne says 3 cheers for the generous childless cat ladies, and that is, you know, one way to put it. Thank you, Marianne. Trend 5 that we're seeing is most donors welcome communication with nonprofit organizations. So over 2/3 of planned giving donors choose to share their information with nonprofits. And the oldest donors and the youngest donors are most likely to share. You have this sort of U curve, which is pretty interesting. 70% of donors in their 20s and 30s agree. They say, when they make a gift, they say, please contact me, nonprofit organization. I would love to share it, talk more with you. And 80% of their donors in their 90s choose to share their information with the nonprofits. Again, they love it. Let's take a look at what this looks like. You see this sort of gentle U curve. It's not so pronounced. But you can see here in 2024, shoots up among the 90 plus folks. Love those folks. And then also high among the 70s, little dip in the 80s, which is interesting, right? The 70-year-olds and the 80-year-olds, and then back up to 90. And you see the youngest folks, right? The 20s and 30s, Gen Z and younger millennials, you know, at the higher end too, but it's a relatively narrow band. So just to give you a sense. There you go. All right, 5 planned giving strategies. So now that we know about this, what should we do? Right, first things, okay, now we're getting all these Gen Z planned gifts. What the heck do you do with a Gen Z planned gift? Right, and you might be tempted to just write them off. Don't do that. Instead, what we're going to do is use this as a signal of intent that this donor is passionate about your organization and say, great, you know, the planned gift is great, it's coming down the road, but let's talk about other opportunities for real-time giving, volunteering, serving on a youth board, something else, right? It's a really good signal as a hand raiser of, oh, I would like to get more involved in this cause. So that's quite helpful. Strategy 2, we have to think about bridging the gap, right? If you zoom out and you look at demographics, which are one of the things that we just know to be true, right? There's not going to magically be more 60-year-olds in 3 years if there aren't that many 57-year-olds right now. Gen X is a much, much smaller generation than baby boomers, and we love Gen X. I know that those of you who are Gen X on the call often feel forgotten. We love Gen X, but it's true that it's a smaller generation, right? As boomers age and pass away, there are simply not enough Gen Xers to make up the lost giving. And so we have to be investing in planned giving now to bridge the gap. What are we bridging the gap to? We're bridging the gap to the larger millennial population, right? So if everyone on average gives the same amount, you're going to get a lot of money in boomer years, less money in Gen X, and a lot of money again in millennials. And you need to make sure that you have that smoothing factor, which is going to be planned giving, right? Otherwise, you risk lower, layoffs, less impact, less revenue, things we don't want to be dealing with. And so this is why we really have to be bridging the gap. The opportunity in baby boomers help you bridge the gap again between the large boomers and the large millennials with our little smaller but still wonderful Gen X group in the middle. Strategy 3, right? We want to keep the door open. Let's set aside some time to review planned giving communications and look for any signs that you might be excluding people or reinforcing stereotypes of who would consider leaving a planned gift to your organization. Try to look for maybe some younger faces to have that, maybe some families, maybe some single people, right? So much of planned giving literature that I see has an older heterosexual couple. And we know that single people actually give way more. And so why don't we think about, make sure that we're featuring some of these folks. Look at this. Is everyone the same race or everyone the same gender? Everyone the same age group when you're putting this out? Let's make sure that we show some more examples because people will see, oh, people like me make a planned gift. 3, remember the legacy piece of legacy giving. Once you understand legacy donors' motivations for giving, consider initiating a conversation around family giving. Hey, do you have any hopes or wishes for how your family might continue your legacy of giving and remain connected with us in the years to come, right? And this isn't necessarily saying after you pass away, it's saying, hey, do you ever want to get your family involved in this? We can certainly talk about how to take them on a tour of the hospital or the zoo or show them around campus or whatever it may be, right? Are there other things like Family Volunteer Day? So really, really interesting. Strategy 4, as I mentioned, let's find our kid-free donors. Remember that single and married individuals without children are by far your best planned giving prospects, meaning single folks without kids, married folks without kids. Many of you don't know which of your donors are kid-free, right? So we know that, man, if we knew which of our donors didn't have kids, we would then put more attention on them from a planned giving standpoint, but we don't know who doesn't have kids. They don't tell us necessarily unless we're very close to them. And so there are a couple of strategies you can use, right? How do we tactfully ask it? You don't just walk up to someone and say, do you have kids? That's sort of a weird question. And so one thing we like to do in surveys is ask this question. Do you frequently discuss your passion or interest in protecting wildlife, in advancing the scriptures, right? In education, whatever, with your children? You said yes, often, sometimes, rarely, or never. NA don't have kids. And this is a very kind and easy way to ask. And then people would be like, nah, I don't actually have kids. I'm a cool uncle. Um, and so you get this information in a way that's quite helpful. And by the way, the folks that say yes often, well, let's go bring those people into the conversation and we can build a family giving plan. So you get a lot of information with this question without really annoying anybody. Okay, bonus strategy, and actually the most important thing, right? Those of you that think we're moving too fast, I can't write everything down, write this down. This is one of the most important things we're going to talk about today. How can you 6x increase your planned gifts with no additional work, right? And this isn't I wish the answer was just buy FreeWill. The answer is not buy FreeWill. Does anyone have a guess at the sort of fastest path to increasing planned gifts by 600% with no additional work? Talk about it. Ask for them. Yes, asking's additional work. Thought I saw someone get the right answer. All right, so far. All right, well, we are like, okay. Kimberly and Nick Meredith, you all are big winners of the day. Everyone else is wrong. Lots of good guesses there. And there's one mistake that even the most advanced plan giving teams make, and making this mistake can reduce your plan giving dollars by up to 85%. What is it? The answer is that gifts that are a percentage of the total estate are 6 to 8 times larger than gifts that are a specific cash amount, right? So asking for a percentage can increase your gifts by 8 times compared to asking for specific cash amounts. Many organizations don't do this, or they treat them as, either one, whatever makes you happy. Don't do that, right? That is a way to plummet your planned giving from folks that would otherwise be quite generous. On your website, ask for percentage gifts and treat cash as a fallback option. People can still do it. We don't not take those gifts, but we really want percentage gifts. Now, why is this, by the way? Well, partly people are worried that an estate's going to shrink with taxes or healthcare costs or something else. And the other people in the plan aren't going to get anything, right? So if it's like 100%, you're great. But let's say it's like 15%. I've got a niece and a nephew I really care about. Maybe I have one kid, whatever it may be. And so I don't want all of it to go to charity. I want to make sure it's protected, that some of it goes there. And most people end up with estates that are actually much bigger than they expect. Why is that? The value of the house is going up, the value of the markets is going up, right? All of these things people tend to actually be wealthier in assets than they expect, right? They forget about some accounts. And so what happens is those percentage gifts just tend to be much bigger. Now, I actually went to Georgetown University as my alma mater. So I love Georgetown. I donate to Georgetown. I even put Georgetown in my will. So I feel okay picking on Georgetown a little bit. Great school, mediocre basketball team, but great school. And this is an example of doing it wrong, right? Again, we love Georgetown. I don't know if there are any other Georgetown grads or staff. Karen's here too. We love Georgetown, but this is wrong, right? And so what you see here, oops, let's go back to it. It says, okay, sample bequest language on the website. It says, I bequeath to Georgetown University, tax ID, whatever, a nonprofit organization located in Washington, D.C., the sum of X dollars or an amount equal to percent net value of the United States or all the residue, et cetera. What would we do differently here? Well, we take out that first line. We take out that sum of dollars. You just have the other two, and then you might have a note at the end of this that's a note. Some people choose to, include a specific dollar amount. This is less common, but if you want to do that, here's the language. And people are really looking for guidance here when they go to this website. What do normal people do? What do other alumni like me do? And this ends up tanking the gift. And so it's really, really important that we're pushing this idea of percent over this idea of dollars. Otherwise, you've got to put 8 times the amount of work in to get the same amount of cash, right? And that's not what we want to do. And so, yeah. Okay, Greta says, also to you, Randy says Patrick Ewing may disagree with you about the quality of the basketball team. I will get back to play giving in a second. I will note that Patrick Ewing, great Hoya, used to coach Georgetown, was so bad that he got fired from being the coach. So just saying, I love Georgetown. Basketball team is not doing great, and I will happy to discuss that more offline. Okay, so let this whole Georgetown discussion really focus on this one thing, which is please, please, please focus on percentages over specific dollar amounts. If you don't remember anything else from the session, please remember this, and your life will be dramatically better. Okay, happy to do other basketball sidebars at a different time. And hopefully most of you have a better school to root for. Okay, so we are wrapping up a little bit early. We're going to dive into some questions, but we are going to take a little bit less time today, get you all into vacation week earlier. But a couple of things. First, my colleague Robert, thank you, Robert, just dropped in the chat. So if you click on the chat right now, you should have plenty of time to take this 45-second survey. Please do that. First thing in the survey is how to begin. Again, this book that we really love. So if you want a copy, make a note, include your address, and we will send it to quite a few folks. So please, please, please do that. Second, we are on Thursday, we're doing a panel with a bunch of really smart strategy leaders about how to raise more cash, raise more non-cash gifts. We talked about how valuable assets are, how to raise more asset gifts during end of year. Now, I know that nobody wants to talk about end of year giving. We're still in summer, but it's going to come in hot and heavy soon. And we need to get our plans in order soon. And there are a bunch of you that don't have the right website configurations, don't have the right gifts available, don't have the right info. We know this. We look at your websites. We love you. We sort of get a sense of how you're doing. Please, please, please make sure to do it. And so make a note there. Come to this session. It's going to be really fun. It's at noon on Thursday, noon Eastern on Thursday. So you all can do the math about what time it is in your area. Other thing in the survey, we already have the book. We already have Thursday session. The plan giving report that we talked about, there is a lot more depth. And in particular, the thing that you're going to look at with, I think, the most interest is at the end of the report, there's one page on each of the different sectors. So faith, education, health, right? All these other arts and culture. And it will give you some insights in specifically how giving to that type of organization is evolving this year compared to last year, how different states are treating it, et cetera. So a lot of good content there. Go check it out if you don't mind. And then one other note in the survey, we're actually doing a little bit of exploration around grant writing and grant management. So if you are someone who puts a lot of time in to doing grants for foundations or government or something else, and you're willing to talk to us or you're interested in technology around that, let us know. We're doing some exploration now. We have some pretty cool things to share there. So make a note in this survey there, and we'll probably follow up later today. All right, last things before we get to some questions. On September 10th, which is in about 2 weeks, at noon Eastern, again, it's a Tuesday, so same time, same place, we are going to talk about end-of-year direct mail. And my dear friend, Josh Alcorn, who is an astonishingly good fundraiser and an astonishingly good storyteller, is going to join. So I get a little bit of a break because I'm going to do about a third of that, and Josh is going to take the lion's share of it. Some of you have seen Josh speak before. He is brilliant and kind and funny. And everyone who comes says, oh, I learned these 4 things that I'm going to do in my direct mail. If you don't do direct mail, don't worry about it. If you don't do direct mail and you want to get into direct mail, you should come. If you already do direct mail, you should come. So come hang out with Josh and me on September 10th, and we will send you an invite for that soon. But just letting you know that's coming in case you were thinking about what to do there. All right, so that is it on presentations. We're not going to do 20 minutes of questions. We'll probably do 5 minutes of questions. And so let's dive in here. But really, just so glad to have you all here. Okay. Great questions. So a couple questions about the report. Is this data from people who made estate plans via FreeWill? Yes. So that is the lion's share of the data. FreeWill is the largest estate planning tool in the country, the most used. There were more than 250,000 estate plans made and 40,000 people included planned gifts in their will. So this is the largest repository of bequest information that exists in the world. So thank you for that. A bunch of questions about, hey, when you talk about Gen Z, you only talk about 6 years. What's up with that? The reason is that we only focus on adults here. We don't share. First of all, you don't have kids making wills, and we don't share personal information for kids. So a bunch of Gen Z is still children. Not everyone is. So that's what that is. Question about how do we tactfully find out the age or demographic of donors? In my organization, we don't have this info. So a couple of things you can do. You can say, hey, we're always looking to find out more, to learn more about our donors, answer a couple of questions, right? And you fill those in. You might ask things like, what decade were you born in? Which is different than asking how old you are. And people sort of treat that question differently. Another question you have is, when we talk about asset-based giving, one of the types of giving that's really taken off are these IRA gifts, which are folks are eligible if they're over 70 and a half, right? And so in a survey, you might say, hey, folks born before this date are eligible for this type of giving. Is this something you want more information about? We don't know how old you are. Is this something you want more information about? If they say yes, okay, now we know they're over 70. Another thing to think about is that, unless you are a particular type of organization where you think you're really youth focused, when we ask nonprofits who do have age data, an enormous percentage of their donors are over 60, over 70, even over 80. And so if you are a traditional nonprofit, a hospital, a museum, a house of worship, a college, your donors are going to be on the older side, right? It's just the case that generally donors tend older than normal Americans. And so unless you have some specific reason to believe otherwise, I wouldn't guess that your organization is like surprisingly young compared to everybody else. So great questions. For asking for percentage-based gifts, what are good percentages to ask for? You often actually don't suggest percentages the way you might suggest dollar amounts on like a cash donation page. So I haven't seen a lot of people say, oh, this. Now, the difference, what are some differences? Well, a lot of houses of worship say 10%, right? That's tithing. Other folks treat it as like, again, sort of in the house of worship, religious space, often people think of it as, the church is an additional kid. So you got 3 kids, it's a quarter, a quarter, a quarter to each kid and a quarter to the church. But generally you sort of leave that blank. Now, in the donor stories you tell, you might want to talk about someone who's left 15 or 20%. And these are going to be really big amounts when you think about it. All right. I think is the $42,000 average bequest from realized bequest or planned intended gifts? That is planned and intended, right? These are estate plans made this year, so they're not realized gifts. One thing that's interesting is a lot of folks include multiple gifts in their will, so that 42,000 is per gift, right? Meaning per organization. And many people are including 3 or 4 or 5 organizations. So you see some really big gifts as well. Okay, so great questions. Laurel says, is the presentation available to us in PDF? Yes. So at the end of the session, here's what happens. Please, if you haven't already, fill out the survey. Thank you, Robert, for doing that. Later today, we will email you, if you fill out the survey, a copy of the report, as mentioned, a link to download a PDF of this presentation, and a link to watch the recording in case you want to share it with your colleagues. I don't know that many of you are going to watch it a second time. I'm really thrilled that you're here the first time. But in case you want to share it, you have that. And it just takes us a few minutes to sort of process the video and get it up on YouTube and whatnot. So, I would expect to look for that in about 2 hours. Hopefully some of you are signing off for the day after this and getting some summertime in. But Anelia said she's going to watch it twice. So I really appreciate that, Anelia. I'm deeply flattered that anyone would watch this the first time, let alone the second time. Thank you, Nick, as well. All right, so with that, let's pause here. I just want to say one more time, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for using this to advance your career and your organization. Hope you are having an absolutely wonderful summer. I hope your college football team wins this Saturday or Thursday, whenever they might be playing. We'd like to wish Mike one more time a happy retirement. Mike, so glad that you spend one of your final days with us. and generally just love getting to do this with you. So thanks for making my day. Really hope this was helpful and look forward to chatting to you all very soon, hopefully Thursday. So if you want to join us and you're ready, that's not going to make you anxious, but you're ready to talk about end of year giving right before you go on a long weekend, come hang out with us on Thursday and we'll have some fun. So appreciate you all and talk to you soon.